Welcome to Planet Poetry. My name's Peter Kenny.
And I'm Robin Houghton. In this episode, our special guest is Martina Evans, who'll be talking about her most recent collection, American Mules, in which we're taking on a cinematic journey featuring characters and tales from Martina's Irish upbringing.
And I'll be digging into the roots of trying to work out how to write eco-poetry, and Robin revisits a favourite collection by Kai Miller.
But before that, we've got a bit of news.
Yes, after 21 episodes, we finally got our act together to make a website.
Yay!
The address is planetpoetrypodcast.com, and you'll find programme notes for all our past episodes and so on there. It's just nice to have a cyber home at last, isn't it?
It is. We did do something over our summer break, didn't we?
Yeah.
So I think what would be really nice now really is for our lovely listeners to share the link via their social media. A bit of a mention on Facebook or Twitter would really help us grow our audience.
Yeah, that's always useful. We're all about being viral. Using the V word, Robin, how exactly are you? You sound a bit croaky and weird today.
I'm afraid myself and my other half have both got the lurgy. So we are in day 4 of our self-isolation. And so, I'm sounding a bit croaky. Apologies for that. By the time this goes out, we'll be on our last day, I think, of isolation. So it's all fine. It's been a bit like a rather bad cold. But no, all good. Thank you.
That's the bounty of double jabs, isn't it?
It certainly is, yes. We're very grateful to the people who've developed the vaccine, and long may it continue.
Well, and long may you continue, Robin.
Oh, thank you. It's looking all right so far, touch wood.
Anyway, maybe we should get back to the show. Let's hear what Martina Evans had to say to Robin.
Martina Evans is an Irish poet, novelist and teacher. She's the author of 12 books of prose and poetry. Her 2018 collection, Now We Can Talk Openly About Men, was published by Carcanet and shortlisted for the 2019 Irish Times Poetry Now Award, as well as a Pigott Poetry Award. Martina has been an associate lecturer in creative writing at Birkbeck University and University of East London, and a creative writing tutor at the City Literary Institute, Covent Garden, for many years. Currently, she is Royal Literary Fund Advisory Fellow and Poetry Reviewer for the Irish Times. Her latest collection, American Mules, was published by Carcanet in April 2021. So, Martina Evans, welcome to Planet Poetry.
Hi there, delighted to be here on this virtual planet.
It's all virtual at the moment, isn't it? We're focusing here on your most recent book, American Mules. And I was just wondering if you might read the opening to Mountainy Men, which is the long sequence in the second half of the book, just to kind of whet our appetites a bit.
So my voice is going to get a bit cork because I'm in the voice of a man called Johnny O'Hare. Mountainy Men, prologue. If you tell your dream, you don't have to dream it anymore, says Alan Ladd, This Gun for Hire, 1942. I can tell you now, I've tried it, and it doesn't work. It's your subconscious, my eye. They were just overexcited about Freud in the 40s. Ingrid Bergman clucking over Gregory Peck in Spellbound, 1945, driving him mad with her fork on the white tablecloth. Well, I, Johnny O'Hare, video shop proprietor, 2008, thought if I wrote it all down, I'd get those girls out of my mind. Then my sister Greta would agree about what the owl fella did, along with a track to the skivvy to our bedridden mother and Blackie the cat, and how we'd have been finished if it wasn't for Mrs. Savage, the postmistress.
I love that start to this long poem, and I think I read somewhere, Fiona Sampson saying that you're just got a great gift for storytelling. We're going to return to this poem later, aren't we? I think Mountainy Men. You can tell us a bit more and see how this story pans out. And it's when I sat down to read it, I just had to read it in one go. I think the way you bring the reader in to each scene, it's almost like you have this sense of a filmic sense of, the camera pans in. And I think I felt that through many of the poems in this book, you seem to kind of have this kind of sense of mischief and deliberately perhaps sometimes withhold key information at the start of the poem. Is this something you like to do?
I like poems to have their mystery. I hate didactic poems, and I'm very, very connected to the Demotic and how people speak, and my mother was very dramatic. It's interesting, actually. Where is it? Oh, I think it's gone. Here on the shelf, V.S. Pritchett said something about Mary Lavin's short stories. It was an introduction to her short stories, and I'm not comparing myself to Mary Lavin. But he said something about the Irish and the short story, that they like to tell something quick and dramatic, but it's a veil for something else.
Ah.
So I love this very rapid something, and there's something else going on underneath. I love all that stuff. I love folk tales, fragments, people's speech, how they use it. And I think in a way I can't speak, I learned it for God knows how many years. It was drummed into us, and I absolutely loathed it because it was beaten into us in primary school by a horrible sadist of a schoolmaster, and I associated with violence. And afterwards I realised I wished I'd worked harder at Irish, because I think it actually informs me a lot. I feel I'm reaching for some language kind of beyond. And I do think poetry is connected with death, and I like the idea of going into our genes, going into our bodies. The whole idea, about film is that it's very close to how our bodies work. Slow motion, flashback, all the rest of it, The filmmakers learned from the poets in the first place, I think. Eisenstein said he learned everything from Milton. I must have said it 1,000 times. I'm always saying it.
Well, you haven't said it on Planet Poetry before, so I like that. So shoes and feet and footwear is a big recurring theme here. Tell us more about that.
When it first started, when I started writing poem about feet and shoes, and I thought a lot about what feet mean, and there's a Cinderella story in every culture. But as I was writing, as all these feet poems started to take off, and they really began to take off, because I've had feet and shoes in other collections, I didn't want to write about it or think about what I was doing. I didn't want to ruin whatever was going on. Marina Warner has written very well, especially in her latest memoir. She's got a whole chapter on brogues and the connection with the original meaning of brogue, meaning tongue in the Irish language.
Right.
I remember hearing a woman saying she had a dress down to the tongues of her boots. I remember some woman in County Kerry once, and I put it into this book, Now We Can Talk Openly About Men, which was where I think the narrative poem began to really gel for me. There is something very powerful about the feet. Yeah. Once I started writing about feet and shoes, the memories just started pouring, like the Madeleine in the cup of tea.
Really?
When I started writing about shoes and feet, it was like doors were sliding open, and I went back to X-ray. And towards the end of the X-ray poems, I was talking more about the eye, which of course connects us with Johnny O'Hare, because he's a terrible voyeur, isn't he? Well, anyone who's interested in film is, I think, a bit.
Interesting.
I wasn't going to publish these two books together at all. It was Michael Schmidt's idea at Carcanet.
When you say these two books, you mean because American Mules has two parts to it, doesn't it? So Mountainy Men is kind of the second half, and then you've got the first half. So it was two books to start with.
Yeah, it's two books in one. So when Michael said to put the two books together, I started to make them echo back at each other.
Right.
We're talking about film noir. Shoes are so important. Clothes are very important, and there's the Barbara Stanwyck coming down the stairs, and the sense of style in noir film is really important.
One of the most moving and also challenging poems for me, I think, was the mad wife brings a flower in her bag, and it says it's after Pier Paolo Pasolini's love letters. I did look this up because I wasn't aware of what that was all about, but I still couldn't quite. I'm intrigued. I wondered if you might tell us a bit more about this particular poem and maybe read it for us.
So I'll tell you a little bit. I was watching Pasolini's love letters, and he asked them, where do babies come from? So it starts with the first 7 lines. well, it's taken from the subtitles, so you can never be sure how good the translation is. But this was the translation of what these little Italian kids were saying. Then it goes into Voices from Ireland, things I remember when I was a child being told to me. I was a very young woman in the 80s, and there was a very bitter referendum in Ireland at the time, abortion referendum, and of course it's since been repealed. I'm always thinking about, this has always been a problem in Ireland, women coming to England to either have babies, the shame around the birth of babies, you know, because there's a lot of stuff going on about the mother and babies homes in Ireland, and all that kind of thing, where mothers who have babies are hidden away one way or another. And generally, I don't think mothers are respected properly, you know, in a lot of ways. But I'm not a didactic writer, so I like to kind of set up echoes. I'm interested to know what was disturbing about you for it. So I'll read it first. The madwife brings a flower in her bag after Pier Paolo Pasolini's love letters. I forgot. From the belly. The madwife brings a flower in her bag. No, the midwife comes, and in her bag she brings a flower. Your uncle brought you? The stork brought me. I was born under the blankets. I was the eictor, the runt. There was a want in me. Nobody told me. Sent from God. Collected at the hospital. Sent down by an angel. In a lemon-buttoned cardigan, a small nun. All in grey, with a pale pink baby sock hanging off her 4 knitting needles. I didn't ask for it. Never be ashamed. Go for help. You can go away quietly and they will arrange for it to be adopted. Jesus gives it to the stork. I know. I won't say. Found crying in a confession box, a shoebox, blue, thrown in a well. She was nursing in England and the letter was found. She said it was fully formed when they took it out. The stork put it in the basket. The midwife comes, and in her bag she carries a flower.
Yeah, it just felt very poignant, the idea of children being told that the stork brings the babies. This nun in grey with a pink sock hanging off her 4 knitting needles. I mean, that's a lovely central image. And then this idea of found crying in a confession box, in a shoebox, thrown in a well. I'm thinking, is this a baby, an unwanted baby? And yet it's in this very soft and sympathetic voice.
Yeah, it makes me very sad as well. These are all voices that have haunted me. So when I was born, I was the youngest of 10, and a nun came in dressed in grey knitting a pale pink baby sock and said to my mother, actually, are all your other children normal? And my mother said it gave her a terrible fright.
As it might.
They thought she was rhesus negative or something, but it was a mistake.
Okay.
All of these things, my mother told me when I was very young, never be ashamed, go for help, you can go quietly, because normally these things were never discussed. And she just told me, you can never be ashamed, go for help. But then it sounded really sinister. But that's the way it was back then. So the confession box, the shoebox, blue, they're all stories I've heard.
Yes, I can see how that, as you say, that comes down to what you were saying before about speech.
Yeah, there are many ways of looking at the story. Margaret Atwood said you should never ask for the true story because it's vicious, multiple and untrustworthy, actually.
And speaking of different ways of looking at the same story, I was interested in this series of poems that are about your experiences as a radiographer. My interest, I suppose, is I came to this poem called Radiographers Are the Coldest of All. And that meant a lot to me because I've been on the other side of it, having experienced radiotherapy and come away from it feeling pretty much traumatized by how I felt I was treated there. And yet I can also sort of see from the other side the people doing that job are under pressure and they see hundreds of women every day. And how can they be expected to put themselves in the shoes of the person on the other side of the screen all the time? So I really enjoyed that poem.
The one thing I thought afterwards when I put the book together was I remembered all the disasters and the bad things. That's what you remember. But I thought anyone reading the book will think, oh my God, we're glad she's left the profession. But of course, people can be very dewy-eyed about the NHS and so on, but it's not run by angels, it's run by human beings, and a lot of things go wrong. I mean, I really, the impetus for me to leave radiography was because I had a child, and it's not a good job. The hours are awful. But I did, even then when I was leaving it, think that it was a great place to be, meeting people.
I wondered if you might read this poem. The ambulance driver said she didn't like my Crocs, because apart from anything else, that's a fantastic title, isn't it? It unfurls as a shocking story, and yet it's still hilarious. Not that I'd ever want to be this person, but I don't know how you feel about. Is one allowed to laugh at it?
Oh,
I mean,
laugh
it's
away.
tragicomic, isn't
laugh
it?
away. I mean, honestly, I just think people don't listen to me. I'm convinced of that the older I get. Because when I was in labour, the nurses just wouldn't let me in. And then I arrive and they said, oh, you're just about to have it. And I was saying, but that's what I was saying.
Oh, yes, that's another poem, isn't it?
Yeah. And here they seem to think I was calling them out because for the fun of it. And I was full of glass. But the irony, the funny connection with it was because I'd read a poem called Night Town that very night in Waterstones, Piccadilly. And I came home and stood on a glass because I was so tired. And all the things that were in the poem in Night Town, the X-ray, the Cinderella reference, because I ended up with a glass foot instead of a glass slipper. I still have glass on my foot from this night.
Ugh.
They all came to pass that night.
Oh, that sounds a bit jinxy.
Yeah, I'm going to have to start writing about winning the lottery.
I think you should.
The ambulance driver said she didn't like my Crocs. And I was at her mercy, not wanting to say I'd been proud to get my tea-toweled bloody foot into any kind of receptacle. They moaned from the bottom. Why is it always 3 flights? Tired? Oh, that's what's happened to the last one. He worked himself to death, literally. He was a cold, purple, literally, cab driver, just 60, just now, before you, dead in his cab. She'd be annoyed, she said, if it was neat and tidy, when I unwrapped my 56-year-old foot, implying there was a case for me being a malingerer, just angling to be carried out for my big night on the Homerton. A feather-quick exam of my foot later revealed to be full of glass, and they had me on my feet, stumbling, following them down my own stairs, as if they'd been called out because I'd lost my sense of direction. This was walking on knives, and my foot didn't like it, burst its red geyser artery at the foot of the stairs. I was helped then, over the bright syrup, clotting on the front steps, and into the van where my blood pressure was taken, and me and my glass bound tightly together for the take-off through the streets of Hackney. In Casualty, a zombie-like fleet worked on computers without lifting their heads, as the two of them wheeled me here and there looking for takers. Politics, politics. She was smiling with the proof of what they were up against. It was past midnight when they found a nurse station open for business. Those horrible Crocs, she laughed again. She'd had enough. She was taking a sick day tomorrow, which was today, literally. Good idea, I called after her from my wheelchair, finally delivered.
Dear, oh dear.
And there was the most wonderful Glasgow nurse waiting for me at the nurse's station, and she was amazing.
There's this fabulous character, Socrates, who appears in one of your poems. And I thought this is a great example of how you managed to sketch out very believable and kind of recognisable characters, or at least maybe not recognisable in the sense of, oh yeah, we meet people like that every day, but you make them completely real for the reader. And I wondered if you might read this poem, Mrs. Schiff's Washing Machine, another lovely title. Is this Is this based on a real experience, or is it a fiction?
It's a fictionalized real experience.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
I had a suggestion about reading this, because when I read it, I think to people listening, they won't know when the lodger is speaking, when I'm speaking. And I wondered if you did the epigraph. How do you feel about that?
Okay.
It's based on an email. I normally don't do this, but I thought it would work better. It would be clearer for the listeners.
Let's try it.
Okay. So, Mrs. Schiff's washing machine.
I wanted to tell you that just by looking at the pictures in the ad again, after I've seen the space, a very warm feeling filled my soul. Myself living in there is such a joyful feeling to be having. Also, you should know I am a non-smoker and very respectable when it comes to the space I live. To me, it's like the temple of my life, really.
It was Socrates who broke the door of the machine, like he broke many things. The smell of his Moroccan gold rising through the inch-wide cracks in the floorboard, lemon bars filling with light every evening. Hell can be funny from a distance, and sometimes up close, like the night we were watching Michal Kakoyannis' Iphigenia, drums and bloodthirsty chants pressing Agamemnon to his agonized decision. "Those infernal drums," he shouts, as Socrates, on cue, sends up thunder from his tubaleki through the smoke, and someone sings, "Spare me the frenzy of passion." I had to tell him to go in the end. He was not a bad man. It was just that it was like being married again. And he broke the door of Mrs. Schiff's washing machine. I just couldn't get over it. Scrubbing and throwing out many smoke-ruined things. He didn't even have the gumption to tell me. Failed landlady. I didn't have the gumption to keep some of his deposit. After he left, I gathered Mrs. Schiff's unbroken everyday plates, 1970s elegance, cream stoneware with green rims and idealized peaches. When we lay them on the table now, it's the nearest thing we have to saying grace, here in the temple of my life, really.
I like the fact that the title is The Straw That Broke the Camel's Back in this lovely tale of smoke and drums and whatever the hell was going on down there. How do you come up with titles? What titles are tricky sometimes, aren't they? Are you someone who takes a while to settle on a title of a poem, or is it something that suggests itself while you're in an early draft?
Both, but if I don't like the title, the poem is no good until I get the title right, and sometimes it can take a while. They're important to me, but I don't waste time. I don't sit there scratching my head. I think maybe, and then I just move on and leave it until I find the right one. But sometimes a lot of them just come.
Perhaps we should come to Mountainy Men and tell us a bit more about that. We heard that lovely prologue at the beginning, and we've met Johnny O'Hare. It's interesting that it's kind of in the voice of the grown-up Johnny O'Hare, but it's also in the voice of him as a boy. And I felt that it was only at the end that we started to see these two viewpoints coming together, and I sort of felt it was a kind of a slow reveal that was really satisfying. It's like there were lots of red herrings along the way in true cinematic style, I suppose you might say. So tell us a bit about how this sequence came about.
So Mountainy Men was started as prose in 2008, but it was based on a letter that was written to me back in the 90s I used to write for the Irish Post here in Britain, and he told me that he and his 3 siblings had been orphans. They grew up on a farm, and when they were young, their mother died and their father married again. And the first family was sent away to an orphanage. I think it was probably the 20s or the 30s. They were split up. It took them years to get together. And he was trying to get back to his other family. They started a second family. And I remember being very shocked. He was very angry. You know, these are the kind of things that are behind the mad wife brings the flower, the unwanted children. But of course, now that I'm older and you realise that people were often very badly off, I start to think, was it they were not able to feed them? You know, things happen. Maybe they didn't intend sending them. Maybe it was temporary. I don't know. I think it's very hard looking back in the past because it was different then.
Yeah.
It really was different. Because I think I was probably more judgmental and it's just a tragic story. So I had a friend, I used to keep saying to him, this story is driving, this is terrible. What do you think of this story? And he said, you just have to write about it. So I wrote a novel, but I'd stopped writing novels at that stage. But I didn't know else what to do with it. So when I started the story, I was using themes of Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah.
And I wanted the witch to be ambiguous, because Johnny wants us to think that Attracta is the witch, but she's just another child, you see.
Yeah.
Attracta's only 16. But he has to make her into the femme fatale because of what happens in the end. But he's haunted by it, so he is quite ambiguous in the beginning. He's saying about these servants and they were called girls and he's tormented by them. But then when he talks about Attracta, she's very, very bad. So that's the femme fatale. It's also about misogyny. It's about how women are judged. And I was thinking in my head, oh, well, Attracta, nobody has any sympathy for her. She could so easily be sent off to one of those mother and baby homes at that time. So if she's clinging on to any bit of power or, any bit of hope of a life, I sympathise with that. So I was kind of disappointed when people didn't like Attracta. They thought I was just, she's not the Queen in Snow White or anything. Not at all. And Greta doesn't get a word in either.
No.
So I think,
yes.
I wondered if I'd let I wondered if I'd let her speak. And then I thought it was much better if she wasn't allowed to speak. Because I think for a long time, men got to say what women were.
Yeah.
And the older I get, the more horrified I am about misogyny and how women have imbibed it and projected and how deeply ingrained it is in our society. But as I said, the way I write, I like to read the way people speak. I like to have the subtext there for people to... So Greta isn't allowed to speak. I let Johnny speak. He had a life. He came out and I thought he wants to speak and he doesn't want anyone else to speak. So it's sad, but he's his father's son. It's very, very sad.
It's quite a shocking ending, and yet, in a way, there he is running this video shop, presumably in the old post office where Greta always wanted to be anyway. And it's a bizarre sort of scenario at the end. But and the fact that he's obsessed with movies, and you think, well, hang on, your whole life's been a movie. Are you going to maybe read one or two of the little sections of this? It's in short sections, isn't it?
Okay, I could do 1 and 2 because that sets the scene.
Okay.
1. I'm not sentimental. That was cut out of me early. That was the Owlfla's territory, the drink territory. At the beginning we didn't know, because the old lady said it was brucellosis. The suffering was desperate, she said. That was the rage, and we were to have the greatest pity because no one suffered more than himself. Attracta came up the mountain, rocking in the corks of her white platforms, her purple-fringed handbag, knocking us all out with her old perfume called Styx. May 76, hotter than the Bronx, us all in a line at the kitchen table, facing into his wonky 6 feet big kitchen window, like the control panel in Star Trek, all the stars, drinking tea under his 25-watt bulb, Attracta's hand rattling the saucer, her big curls and outsized eyes, the Owlfla's blue-black hand on the jamb of the door, the keys of the powder-blue Cortina over his calloused wrist. She should have buttoned up instead of casting judgment in our window. You can't go into a family home and start choosing curtains for them. 2. Stuck to the bed for 7 years. To hear the Owlfla speak of the old lady like that would make Blackie sick. I nearly spewed my tea, only I knew even then how to button up. Greta had her head craned looking at Attracta and her perfume. Impressed. I wasn't. We never had curtains on the big window. The Owlfla should have told Attracta to skip it, but he grinned like a fool. He was full of sucker talk after his nagging, And who was a tractor that he was trying to impress? A tractor used to be known as a girl. A girl could be any age, basically a servant. Some were treated rough. I heard stories from people coming into the shop. A girl could be any age, as old as 60. She might be made to scrub a floor with a wooden brush with no bristles. She might be made to sleep in a shed and half-starved. She could be attacked by the man of the house or the son of the man of the house. Girls were dying out in 76. They said a tractor was too stupid to finish school. She was hardly gone 16. I found out afterwards.
Thank you for reading those too. And I thought that's where we first meet the idea of the big window, don't we? That actually then proves to be a very key issue later in the poem. I
was thinking of the oven I was thinking about Hansel and Gretel. You'll understand what I mean without giving away the oven in Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah, no spoilers.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Martina.
Thank you, Robin.
So I really enjoyed the way she, in her phrase, she loves the demotic, the sort of everyday conversational things. You look at all her titles, Mrs. Schiff's washing machine, and the ambulance driver said she didn't like my Crocs.
Yes.
Even sort of mountainy men, they're sort of like phrases you could imagine overhearing in a pub or, amongst friends that were just chatting in a friendly way.
Yes.
And they just feel real and unmannered, I really like that.
Yes, this sense of that you're watching a movie, or it's almost like a play. I mean, you write plays, don't you, Peter? So it's a sense of creating realistic dialogue or creating realistic characters through their dialogue. Martina said at the beginning, didn't she, that this quote about the Irish like to tell something quick and dramatic, and it's usually a veil for something else.
Yeah, I think there was a lovely Irish quality about that work, that sort of that flowiness, that being inhabited by the voices of characters, that just sort of came so naturally to her. She is a storyteller, just like the way she told the story about the nun who attended her own birth.
Yes.
This idea of just the stories just coming out of her at every angle. That poem that you asked her to read, "The Mad Wife Brings a Flower in Her Bag."
Mm.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, that I was really moved by that. This is such a moving subject, and the sort of little shoebox size coffin at the end, as it were.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. And I thought because she talks about how she doesn't want to write in a sort of didactic way, and I was intrigued by the way she sets up this parallel between this little short by Pasolini, with the little kiddies being interviewed and asked questions. And
I didn't really understand what that was.
Yeah, I gather it was a short film by Pasolini where small Italian children are interviewed and asked questions about where babies come from. So we get this out of the mouth of babes kind of stuff coming.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yes, they come from the stork or whatever, stuff they've heard, stories they've heard or grown up with. And that's very much like she's talking about the stories that she grew up with, the stories that she heard. A period of time in Ireland where if you were a young unmarried woman and you got pregnant, the choices that you had to make and the possibilities that were or were not open to you. And I think that's the poignancy,
I think we both really like that filmic quality in her work. We were talking earlier about how that quote from her about Eisenstein learnt everything from Milton.
Yeah, I love that.
I've always loved Milton, but those swooping vistas and great abysses of darkness and devils and things plummeting through them. And, yes, that is unbelievably filmic, Milton. But the sort of incidents like Mrs. Schiff's washing machine.
With this guy called Socrates. I mean, that was fabulous, I thought.
There was a line in that really jumped out to me about hell can be funny from a distance. Something characteristic about her work is that the ambulance driver said she didn't like my Crocs. It's just a throwaway kind of line, but it snowballs into standing for something, so much darker and more horrible as you go on. And that whole Mountainy Men, just really nice title. But that's a real kind of story in verse form, isn't it?
It is, and we only got a taster of that, and I didn't want to press her for any more of the plot because it would be a shame.
Don't want to spoil it.
Don't want to spoil it.
Yeah.
But I was really sort of gripped by that. It unfolds very cleverly in these kind of layers that peel back a little way, and then you've got to wait a few more pages till you actually see the significance of that. And I rather enjoyed that. So, and she said it started as a novel, didn't she? Basically,
Yeah.
So I can absolutely believe that. This idea of combining two books in one is an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah. She said her editor at Carcanet,
Michael Schmidt.
yeah, said to join them, and suddenly some magic happened in between.
It sounds like she said then she made the effort to make sure there were these sort of echoes, I think, throughout. So,
Yeah.
so it's all part of the, the magic dust of putting together a collection.
American Mules is quite an unusual title.
Yes, that I didn't ask her to talk about that, did I? But yes, one of the poems, it comes up. It's basically a type of shoe.
Oh, they're shoes. I was expecting four-legged mules for some reason.
Well, yeah, on the cover of the book, that's what I found it so intriguing. The cover of the book is a picture of looks like a kind of a American West landscape.
Yeah.
And I thought, yes, American mules. Oh, something to do with, the Old West or something. But there's nothing about that. But of course, the landscape then, the American landscape ties in with Mountainy Men, where you've got this boy who's narrating as an adult man who now runs a video shop, and he's obsessed with film noir, American movies. So things do tie together.
Yeah, well, it was great to have her on the show.
Wasn't it? Yeah.
She's such a writer of substance. And,
Indeed, a heavyweight.
Yeah.
So the book is called American Mules by Martina Evans, published by Carcanet. I think you've been thinking about green issues, haven't you, Peter? What you've been reading lately?
Well, you know me, finger on the pulse and all that. It's COP26 at the moment. I went a few weeks ago to see a reading by Richard Powers, who's a very famous novelist. His last but one book was called The Overstory, and it won a Pulitzer Prize. And it's very much involved with trees and forests and how people's histories kind of weave in with the trees, and how the trees are a vast network and communicate with each other. And his latest book, which I've just almost finished now, is called Bewilderment, and it's about a young boy's connection with nature and standing against the ghastliness of the ecological problems we're facing, and trying to find ways of doing that. Mm-hmm. When I went to Richard Powers' talk, it was just like a sort of a wonderful object lesson of how to do these things. So he didn't read anything from his book, but he gave instead like a 40-minute talk, kind of like a spoken essay, but just really conversationally, beautifully wrought talk, just absolutely inspiring. He's kind of in his early mid-60s now, and he was talking about the relationship with the future, and how as a child he was reading all these science fiction novels, and the idea that there could be life on other planets and people would be zooming around, and then and encountering them, and how that dream gradually died as he got older, and they discovered Mars that looked dead and all the other planets looked dead, and how this whole thing is now turned on its head, and they're beginning to look optimistically at things that they had overlooked before as possible sources for life. And he was talking about, either way, if we discover that we're the only living things in the universe, then we better take care of everything. Or if we don't, and we discover there is life out there, that it kind of removes this idea of humanity being somehow privileged and unique and super important. And he was saying, there'll always be life on this planet. We just might not be part of it. The planet's gone through all these extinction events already and so on. But I just came out of that feeling, wow, he was being really positive and really saying we should be hopeful. We should actually engage with these things rather than being stunned into this kind of horror. I've been thinking about, how do you write green poetry? And, what sort of thing do you say? I've read a few things which are, has this whole problem of political poetry where it's like, we're killing the planet. That's terrible, isn't it?
And that goes back to what Martina was saying in an interview about not wanting to be too didactic, isn't it? How do you make your point without it just banging a drum?
Yeah. Elizabeth Merter, that we talked to a long time ago, who set up this
Channel magazine.
Channel magazine in Ireland. A lot of the work that's featured there is kind of linking the personal with the ecological. But to my mind, a lot of poetry that's written about this kind of issues are very small scale. They're not, people don't feel able to be really grand about, their ambitions anymore, because that somehow seems kind of maybe patriarchal and entitled or something. So anyway, I thought I need some guidance on this. So just by chance, I was given this book by Timothy Morton, who's a philosopher based in the US. And it's a part of Penguin's Green Ideas series, and it's called All Art is Ecological. So I thought, well, maybe there are some strategies here for writing about green things in poetry and so on.
Yeah.
And I found the book absolutely mind-bogglingly infuriating. It was like eating a mouthful of popping candy.
Oh, I'm trying to imagine that. In what sense? Tell me more.
Bursting with ideas that are all exploding at the same time and going in different directions.
Okay.
But I found it quite exasperating because just his style is just so casual. He's very reductive, wannabe hip language and stuff, and name dropping and just tiresome stuff.
Oh dear, yeah. That is a sort of a genre, isn't it, of book? I know what you mean, sort of popular, I suppose, aiming to be soundbitey popular. I
was saying recently in a podcast that one of my problems is jumping to instant dislike. So I had a word with myself and continued. And actually, there are some really interesting ideas in here. And I think maybe his intention is just to set off a load of fireworks and run away and see what happens. Let me just give you a sense of his style as well. And he says, there's no good reason to distinguish between non-humans that are natural and ones that are artificial, by which we mean made by humans. It just becomes too difficult to sustain such distinctions. Since, therefore, an artwork is itself a non-human being, this solidarity in the artistic realm is already solidarity with non-humans, whether or not art is explicitly ecological. Ecologically explicit art is simply art that brings this solidarity with a non-human to the foreground. So, in a nutshell, what I'm thinking that's meaning is that, you make a poem or a piece of art and it sort of becomes a thing in the world. And just by being a thing that isn't a person, it has somehow kind of some dubious solidarity with the rest of ecology.
Right. So like a poem has some solidarity with a tree in a rainforest or something.
Because it exists as a thing in the world is where he's going to. So I just think as a kind of stimulus for, writing anything, I don't know, that didn't seem tremendously exciting to me. But then he's talking about, ultimately we have to relax into an awareness that we're natural things as well. He says, I can't tell you how many environmentalist conferences I've been to where the ending atmosphere had to do with some kind of fist-clenching, jaw-clenching desperation to be or do something totally different. What a setup. Once you've established this totally different space, you're already separated from it by a gigantic chasm. And being right or smart in this kind of world means showing yourself and everyone how deep and wide this chasm is. And this is the important bit. You've just made sure that you are never going to be ecological. The one thing that could help gets drowned out by the fear of the intensity of our reactions to the data input. Oceans acidifying, climate warming, species going extinct. So in a way, that's kind of people getting paralyzed by the idea, talking about doing something to the world rather than being part of it.
It's a paradox, isn't it? Because if you're someone who is completely and utterly concerned with the future of the world, then you also believe that humans are a very small part of that world, I suppose, and yet we have a duty to do something. So that those things don't quite sit together, do they? If we are just one part of the whole natural world, why does anything we do why do we think it's going to make a difference? There's a kind of an arrogance to that assumption.
I think what he's trying to do is remind everybody that they're part of the world already. He says, you are already a symbiotic being entangled with other symbiotic beings. You are breathing air. Your bacterial microbiome is humming away. Evolution is silently unfolding in the background. You stop reading this book and look around you. You don't have to be ecological because you are ecological.
Mm-hmm.
So
where does that leave us?
Yeah, I don't really...
Do we not do anything because it's all going to happen anyway and we're just part of nature and nature decides what happens? Or do we do something because it makes us feel better to do something that we're not ruining the world?
I think he's talking about sort of like a shift in human consciousness because we've come too far away from the natural, and it's just he's trying to remind us that we are actually just another entity on this complex interconnected planet.
Is that something that people don't tend to think then? Because I can't think of any other way of looking at life, at human life.
Yeah, well, it is a bit of a straw man. Yeah, an very interesting and provocative and annoying book I found.
Sounds like it.
I went to it to find something to kind of stimulate how do you respond to the ecological crisis with art?
Yes.
But I don't know. In terms of poetry, where does it leave us? W.B. Yeats had a line about man is in love and loves what vanishes. You could write a lot of poetry about, tinged with regret and awfulness about all the terrible things we're doing and the vanishing species and all the rest of it.
Or you could talk about reasons to be positive. Like, there's probably no life in the rest of the galaxy, but we are one galaxy, and who knows, and an infinite number. And so if one thinks of all the stars in the sky, the size of the universe, well, there is no size to the universe, then for me, that's very optimistic. There's life somewhere else, but we're never going to know that, whether there is or not. But it's nice to believe.
There's somebody podcasting in a parallel universe, speculating.
Yes, that was a good thing to talk about on planet poetry. But it should be universe poetry. It hasn't quite got the same ring to it, though, has it?
Shows ambition, though. So, what have you been engaged with? Hopefully some actual poetry.
Some actual poetry. Yes, I've been rereading Kai Miller's collection from a few years ago. The Cartographer Tries to Map a Way to Zion. And it's a bit of a favourite. It's funny because I went to see him read in Hastings a couple of years ago, and I thought, I'm going to be a fangirl. I look out this book and get him to sign it. Could I find the book? So then I spent the next 2 years cursing whoever it was I lent this book to for not giving it back. And then I rather sort of had to eat humble pie because I thought, I'm going to get it out of the library and be done with it. And when I got it out of the library, it said, you borrowed this book 3 years ago. So clearly I'd only had a library book of it to start with. Anyway, that's all by the by. So, but I loved it then and I loved it now. I just sort of sat down and read it right through. And I suppose I'm also thinking in terms of the famous first collection that I'll be putting together sometime soon. Because I like the way he has woven together various strands. There's this, at the heart of it is this long sequence. There are 27 little short poems in that sequence, but they're woven through the book between other poems which are related to this sequence, but they're kind of little breaks. And I rather like this format of threading a sequence through with other material. So you have this sense of having pauses for thinking about different things. And so
it's a really good wheeze for holding a collection together as well, isn't it?
I suppose so. The basic sequence is a kind of a dialogue between a character called the Rasta Man and another character called the Cartographer. And it's basically how they negotiate their way through this idea of white man coming to the West Indies, and it's a complete sort of unmapped territory. It's completely blank. So he creates a map and names places, and there was nothing there before, of course. And then the Rasta Man is gently kind of questioning this and educating him as they go along.
Yeah.
It's a really nice dialogue. One feels sympathy on both sides. Quite a number of the poems are written in a kind of Creole type of English. When Kai Miller reads it, it sounds authentic and wonderful. But when little South London me reads it, it could sound a bit naff. But I'll read you a short bit, shall I? This is one of the poems that's threaded through. There's a number of poems about place names, these very graphic place names and sort of the stories about how they came about or whatever.
Cool.
Place name. Me no send, you no come. In plain English, do not enter without invitation. For consider the once upon a time adventures of rude Pickney answering to name Goldilocks, Nuff Gal, self-invited into House of Bears, assumed at once her colonial right to porridge, to beds, and to chairs. The baff-hand child went in just so, nor even a token offering of honey, and just like that, proceeded to bruck up things. If only she had penned the secret names of places. Me no send, you no come. Without invitation, you're not welcome. Or else, come in as you please. Just know that this ground, these bushes, these trees observe you, and with suspicion many centuries deep. So there's that nice sense of,
Nice, yeah.
Goldilocks suddenly becomes this, this sense of entitlement. I'd never thought about it that way. Yeah, she walks in and uses all the bear stuff and doesn't even bring them a jar of honey or anything.
Tell the
or ask
imperialist
permission.
Goldilocks, yeah.
Completely.
Oh,
And
that's
that's
really
just-
cool. I like that.
It's a sort of little taster of the style. A wonderful collection. I actually just bought his a more recent one as well, In Nearby Bushes, but I haven't got around to reading that yet.
Oh, the title's in Nearby Bushes.
The title is called In Nearby Bushes. This one, I'm not sure about that one, but this one, The Cartographer, is published by Carcanet.
Yeah.
A bit like Martina. So we're having a little Carcanet promo,
Yeah.
folks.
Carcanet
but
Italy.
but no money has passed hands,
Sadly.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
No payola on Planet Poetry.